welcome to another episode of the Boxing Lockdown, powered by SA Boxing Talk. The two gentlemen are in the Zoom house, Hayden and Cyril. We now are in Australia, interviewing a very special person in my career and my life, and also in boxing, I believe. Altamura, international boxing consultant, matchmaker, promoter, works for MTK as well. I mean, he's done it all. Altamura, welcome to the Boxing Lockdown.
You're in Australia and you haven't come to visit me yet? That's very, very rude, Colin.
Mike, yeah, we go back a long, long time. And obviously we're going to touch on that in this interview. But I want you to tell us your first boxing memory and experience.
Yeah, that's a good question. My first boxing memory would be from when I was about 3 or 4 years of age. And I just remember my brother talking to my father, because my father was a prelim fighter in the early 60s and then had worked as a coach on the national team in like the late 70s, early 80s, and then was still kind of active here or there through to probably about 2002. But yeah, so when I was about 3 or 4, I remember my brother talking to my dad about some boxer named Graham Brook. And I didn't know what a Graham Brook was, but that's my earliest boxing memory. And of course, Graham Brook was a Commonwealth lightweight champion from Melbourne, Victoria, very, very talented Indigenous boxer. And that was my brother's favourite fighter growing up. So that was kind of my first introduction. And then from there, we're very good family friends with Lester Ellis, the former IBF 130-pound world champion. So it's probably like early days, I was always hearing about Graham Brook, Lester Ellis. And then kind of probably when I was maybe 6 or 7, I started to learn a little bit about my dad's own career and things like that. But in terms of, say, like, my own interest was probably sparked, really, I'd say. Obviously, the Tyson era, I think, like everyone. For me, Lester was always my idol, but internationally, you know, you look to Tyson, you hear of names like Buster Douglas, and you watch the 30-second clip on the news, but, you know, people don't realize back in the 90s, early 90s, you're not going on Twitter and watching a whole fight. You're just seeing a snippet of a stoppage on the news. So I know, like, in terms of like my own interest, probably about 1992, I remember buying an issue of KO Boxing magazine and also Fist magazine. KO Boxing had James Toney on the cover, and the Fist magazine, from memory, had like an image of Toney, but then Graham Spike Chaney, who was a top Australian prospect, welterweight, he was like in the bottom corner. So that's like the first time I can remember spending my own money on something boxing related, and it just grew from there.
Mike, you started managing boxing at a very young age. I think you were still in your teens when you started managing boxers.
Yeah, I was 17.
How difficult was it to get people to take you seriously as a young kid, managing fighters?
It took a long time. I don't think anybody took me seriously. But that's why I guess it kind of just pushed the hunger further, and it tested what was within my character, because if I didn't belong, I would have been flushed out very quick. But, you know, like, I think maybe the first 7 or 8 times that I took fighters out for opportunities, in which, I'm telling you, Cyril, every time I thought, sure thing, we were going to win. I think my guys went like 1-6. And it was very, very humbling. And I think it's sometimes what's necessary to really cultivate, you know, what's within your character and how much drive you have for the sport. So it was good, because it was, I guess, like they say, like a baptism of fire, where I really had to go through a lot of hardship to ascend. But then by the time I was able to build kind of into my mid-20s and that, I felt like I was starting to turn the wheel in terms of like the fight for respect. And then the opportunity started to come. So it was a blessing. And like, you know, anytime, like when you're young, you always feel like the establishment is holding you down, or people are working against your cause. And to some extent it was true, but also my attitude was probably deplorable as well, you know, in thinking that I was just going to storm in and change history. History reflects in the sport that people don't walk into management at 17. Usually you have a little bit of life experience and you build your craft. And, you know, but when you're that age, you think, all right, I'm getting started now. I can run rings around these existing dinosaurs in the sport, when in reality you should be learning from those who have come before you and be, taking as much knowledge and as much lessons as possible. But yeah, I mean, it was a long time ago. It's funny because sometimes people are like, ask me, like, now, how many years have you been managing fighters? I'm like, 19. And they're like looking at me and they're trying to figure out my age. I'm like, don't worry, I started very, very young. But yeah, I wouldn't want it any other way.
So, Mike, I wanted to ask you about the whole COVID-19. Obviously, you're keeping yourself busy. I see you hitting the boxing bag. You're keeping nice and fit there. But I wanted to know, if this had happened early in your career, let's just say when you started managing, how much of a difference do you think it would have made then, as opposed to, because you're quite set now, as opposed to now?
That's a really good question. See, my mindset has always been that when anything like this presents, that on the other side, if you work and you build your fundamentals in that time, in the interim, that you're going to grow moving forward. So back in the day, I was living off vapors anyways. I was hustling. I worked every kind of job imaginable. My background's journalism, so I work as a freelance journalist. I would go work in a factory for a day. I was working as a private investigator, do whatever I needed to do to get by. So I think that if it was in that kind of situation, I would have looked at it and thought, well, everyone is on an even playing field now, and it's my time to start catching up. So I would have looked at it as, it's time to mature, time to stay hungry, and try to see the opportunities. So I'm not sure how different it would have been. The one thing I can tell you is that this is probably the break and the rest that I needed, because I was traveling pretty much non-stop for about 3.5 years. And even though I cut it back to a high degree last year and coming into this, it's like in 2018, I did 111 flights, which is just ridiculous. That's basically a flight every 3 days in 28 countries. So I cut it back last year. I was cutting it again this year, but sometimes you don't get kind of sufficient time to rest and reflect and spend with family and friends. So I've had that now, and yeah, I feel revived.
Mike, I want to go back to a comment that you made, and you and I often talk and we joke and we tease each other about it. But you mentioned dinosaurs in the sport. I want to ask you, why, for example, has a guy like Don King kind of fallen off the map and a guy like Bob Arum stayed so relevant? Is it because he had the vision to surround himself with young, dynamic people, and King thought he could run it all by himself? What's your opinion on that? And give us an explanation in your opinion.
Arum built a better team, a more sustainable team, and Arum knows when to delegate. He's a brilliant man. But you've got to think, this is a guy that started working as an attorney in the offices of Bobby Kennedy. So he's seen everything from the political landscape of how to set up a structure to, you got to think, he's lasted multiple eras in the sport and he's always remained at or near the top. There's not one period of time over the last, say, 35 years, 40 years, you can say that Top Rank hasn't been, I want to say, the top 3 or 4 promoters in world boxing. In terms of the size of their stable, the volume of the events that they're running, the budgets of the events they're running, the stars that they promote. And I think that that's a lot to do with Arum surrounding himself with the right people. But I'll tell you something, and you've seen it with Bob, his energy is incredible. The last time that I seen him, I was in New York. And I asked him, what he was going to be doing the next few days. He's like, I'm on a plane to Paris tomorrow. So he's still making, and that was, of course, I believe, to sign Tony Yoka, the Olympic gold medalist. But still, even at his age, what is he now, 88, 89? Still at his age, he's out there hustling and understands the value of getting on a plane and making the deals, which King always did too. But the thing is, I'll ask you this, Colin. When you think of Don King's company, who do you really know of beyond Don King and, say, Carl and Eric King? You'll remember Bobby Goodman, but you can never think, all right, who was King's matchmaker? Who was King's vice president? Whereas, you think at Top Rank, Carl Moretti has been a stalwart in the industry for like 30 years, from main events, he's signed there, to DeBella, now to Top Rank. Brad Jacobs, who I think is one of the most brilliant guys in the sport, he was operating boxing at the USA Network. He was running a square ring for Roy Jones Jr. when Roy Jones was on top of the world. So there's not that ego around or with Bob where he's worried about bringing someone in and the attention may be on them. Then he's got Todd the Buff, who is very, very clever at overlooking operations. He's more like on the TV side of things and knowing how to brand the company and that. And then you look at the matchmakers. Bruce Trampler and Brad Goodman, they've created more world champions than anybody when you think of like a matchmaking team. And people overlook that. People think in the sports, look, there's some guys out of the amateurs that are destined to be stars. And no matter how they're matched or what hands they're in, they're going to find a way to succeed. But a lot of guys are beautifully matched and to a degree manufactured so that they garner the necessary experience on the way up. And those two guys have done a brilliant job with so many careers.
You've worked with a number of African fighters, especially Ghanaians. How did your relationship with African fighters come about?
Yeah, that's a good question. Early days when I was 17, I was running a website called Fighter Network, and essentially it gave fighters an opportunity and outlet. You've got to think like, this is like 2000, 2001. So there's BoxRec even wasn't what it is now, but there's no Facebook, there's no Twitter, there's no Instagram. There's no way to connect the fighters to people around the world for opportunities. There's only a very, very limited range of agents and matchmakers that were really accessible. So I created this website which gave athletes around the world a platform to list their name, list their credentials, their weight class, their record, and to put their contact there. And then on the flip side of that, I got onto matchmakers around the world, and they would give me fight opportunities to publish on the website. So I was kind of, the two were marrying up each other, but being a little green, I didn't have the foresight to think, okay, if I withhold the fighter's contact, then the matchmakers have to go through me to book them. I just put it all on there. But what happened is there was a few fighters I started just giving them opportunities, and they'd ask me, oh, what do you want? I'm like, no, I don't want to charge you anything. Just go fight, do your best. And so my name started to build from there. And, the thing is, like, a lot of fighters get overlooked, very, very talented fighters. So, these people around the world didn't realize I'm a 17-year-old kid. All they thought was I'm a guy from Australia running a successful website. So I had boxers from Uganda reach out. I had a kid from Guyana, a kid from Panama. Like, just when you think of places where the opportunities might not be so prevalent, they're the kind of people that would entrust a random person on the other side of the world they've never met to take on their careers. So it was kind of a blessing. And because of, say, those early days, I was given opportunities by African athletes, blindly, really. I've always made it kind of a, I guess, like a goal of mine to really grow the sport and to nurture talent in the continent and to shine the light on talented fighters in the continent. Like I remember, and I talk to Colin about this all the time, like I remember growing up watching episodes of USA Tuesday Night Fights, and, you see guys like Botile from South Africa, Vuyani Bungu, Dita Paul Malafiani, and you're thinking, why aren't these guys even getting covered in the magazines to the extent that they should be? But like, say, in Australia with the Fist magazine, we had Pete Moscati, who was doing a fantastic job of covering the South African fighters. But because so many of them I was hearing about them but never seeing them, it makes you more curious. So I guess going back to your question, the reason why I've always kind of focused and nurtured talent in Africa is because I saw an opportunity. I feel like a lot of these really talented kids in the region either get overlooked or they get exploited. And I don't think either of those things is correct. There's so much talent. You look at how primitive some of these facilities are, especially in like Accra, Ghana. I've seen like 4 guys win world titles from there, training in gyms that don't have a boxing ring. It's incredible. I'm like, how do you get a feel for the dimensions? How do you get a feel for how to move? Like I've seen one guy preparing for a world title challenge who was sparring openly outside, and he had his adversary pinned against a car, so they had to break it up. Like what I'm saying is, like I see a very raw diamond, and if you keep polishing that diamond, you're going to end up with many, many world champions from the continent because of the fact that there's an inbred hunger in these kids.
I want to speak about another special fighter. Colin trains him, Maruti Mtsilane, who's come into your journey as well. I mean, you've traveled for his fights and you've helped out. A touching moment, and I don't know if a lot of people would have picked up on this, but Maruti Mtsilane wore the cowboy hats in one of his fights, and I know that means a lot to you. And can you explain to everyone basically what that was?
Yeah, well, there's a boxer I managed, Dwight Cowboy Ritchie, and unfortunately he passed away last November from cardiac arrest. So he actually collapsed while sparring. He's a very talented Australian fighter, only 27 years of age. And so Maruti's next title defense was, of course, in Japan, I believe December 23rd against Akira Yagashi. And I asked Maruti going in, because Maruti had asked me a couple of times, before the bout, how I was doing, and passed on his condolences for Dwight passing away. So I spoke to him and explained to him how much of a gesture it would be for him to wear the cowboy hat either out or post-fight for his contest with Yagashi. So when he did that, I just think that really reflects to you how humble and how respectful a person Maruti is. I think he's one of the most exemplary characters that I've worked with in all these years. And probably, like, when I look at my journey in boxing, I don't think that there's anything or anyone that has made me more ecstatic or more delighted to see succeed than Maruti Mtsilane, because he's such a good human. And it's one thing that, like, till the end of my days in this sport and beyond, I always preach to people what a great character the kid is and how respectful he is, because he's the reason why I fell in love with boxing. It's fighters and athletes like him who better themselves. And, you see him, he's babyface outside the ring and an absolute gentleman and a savage inside the ropes, albeit a fair savage. He's a respectful 24/7. He's just one of the most outstanding people I think I've ever met in my life.
Mike, I want to talk to you about a fighter or fighters throughout your career. One particular moment where a fighter disappointed you so much and broke your heart. And who was that fighter and what was it like?
Oh, there's so many. Outside the ring a lot. Outside the ring a lot. I'll give you a couple of different ones. There's athletes that I know what the potential was, but they just weren't prepared to graft and weren't prepared to go through the sacrifice. And, like I always talk to fighters about, that this is your job year round. You need to be working your skills in between fights. You can't just think that if you're, say, a top 15 contender and you're fighting 3 times a year, that you break up your boxing schedule into 3 times 7-week camps. You need to be working and refining your skills the other 31 weeks of the year. And so I've had guys that have really lacked discipline, and that's been a big disappointment. But I've also learned over time that the greatest attribute of a champion is consistency. And it's right here. It's a heart and determination. So, they weren't made out for the path. It wasn't for them. Maybe something else they do in their lives it was made out for. But in respect to guys that disappointed me, there was a kid, Filipino boxer I was working with, based in Australia, Ronnie Ganoi. And he knocked out Robbie Peden. So, hellacious puncher. And I remember, like, for years watching him live and watching him on TV and just thinking, this kid really deserves an opportunity. And then when I started working with him, and we only worked together for like 3 fights, but I saw the other side. I saw a guy that wasn't the most disciplined, wasn't the most dedicated guy, and wasn't appreciative of the people around him. So that was one where I was like, you know what, I got to step away from this, you know. In terms of the most disappointing night, there's a few, but one of them has to be Daniel Dawson versus Austin Trout. He threw 5 punches in round 3 and dropped him twice. And then he went out in round 4 and just didn't let his hands go. And it was so disappointing because I remember at the time I had DBC was so liberal in sending me a contract for the fight that there was no rematch clause, nothing. So he was getting paid exceptionally well, and if he won the fight, he could just walk into whatever, you know, opportunity would present next. So I had looked at the odds, and he was like a 19-1 underdog. But I knew that Bobby Main, Daniel's trainer, had the right kind of game plan, and I knew that Daniel, for that fight, if Austin Trout was going to go at him aggressive and try and be impressive, he could walk him into a right hand. Daniel had dynamite in his right hand. So it was one of those things. I just in advance made a call. I knew that Miguel Cotto needed an opponent in December, and I made very, very preliminary talks, and we're told, yeah, look, you win this fight, you're right in the mix for Cotto. So I'm thinking, all right, this kid's so many years, world champion kickboxer, a top 5 rated boxer in the world, but he's never really secured that payday. And I'm thinking, you know, maybe it's $250,000, $300,000 in the Cotto fight. And then he drops Trout once, and then I'm screaming, I'm like, go after him, go after him, go after him. Nothing. He's waiting. And then right before the bell to end round 3, he hits him with another right hand, and Trout folds. And I'm like, all right, he's hooked him now. He's gone. But, you know, as it turns out, Trout was the fish that got away, you know, and he went on to win a 10-round decision. And it was heartbreaking because I knew that, you know, that had he gone out and let his hands go, I felt like he could have stopped him in the next round or 2. And if he did, you know, potentially it's life-changing money thereafter. So it was a tough experience.
I want to go back to talk about Moruti Talani. When you and along with Colin brought him to MTK and into World Championships, where basically challenged for the world title, he was well into his 30s. Could you see him dominating opponents like he is doing now?
Yeah, he's an exceptional fighter. You got to. I know that like age is always on people's mind, but I was really alerted to how talented he was when he beat my friend Hussein, and beat him pretty comfortably in, I believe, an IBF eliminator, and then he doubled down on that by giving Nonito Donaire a hell of a fight. It was only a cut that stopped it in round 6. But you go look at the guys he beat after. I mean, Miranda, future world champion. Casemiro, future multi-division world champion. Tete, future world champion. So the credibility is there, you know, and it was reflected. And it's just because, say, after vacating the IBF title, he was fighting for a lesser sanctioning body, and in the wilderness not being seen, doesn't take away from his capabilities. Like even he beat, this is a Filipino boxer he beat a few years ago, Genesis Labronza, is it?
Yeah.
Like he's currently rated top 5. He's a solid fighter. So this is all before I became involved in his journey. So there's obviously the concern in the back of your mind that maybe age or father time will finally catch up with him. But he's also an exceptionally disciplined guy. He's in pretty good shape year-round, good listener, and the other thing is good fundamentals. And fighters usually with really sound, solid fundamentals and physical strength like him can fight a lot deeper than others. It's just like, for me, it's incredible because it's almost like you go into every fight thinking, okay, is he going to get old in this one? Is he going to reflect his age in this one? And then he keeps rising to the occasion. And people were stunned and surprised, but, I feel like he's still got a lot of unfinished business in the flyweight division. And for me, like, my dream is just really to see him secure that payday that he's deserved for a good 10 years.
Mark, I liked the little bit of humor that you used, that Trout was the fish that got away. I really enjoyed that comment. What I want to ask you, and it's a bit closer to home now, is a fight that's been rumored to be taking place between Joseph Parker and Lucas Brown, Australia versus New Zealand. It's sort of, I don't know if it's going to happen, but what would your take be of that fight?
I'm with New Zealand on that one. Yeah, Joseph Parker's a really nice guy. I think Joseph knocks him out in about 2 rounds. I don't think Lucas has a lot left in the tank. I think he's very available and there to be hit. And Joseph kind of had a flat night, I'd say, against Dillian White, but I think he's much better than that. I think he's a guy that went into the Joshua fight, the unification, with a lot of high hopes, and then people kind of underrated him a little bit since, kind of riding off his capabilities, but he's still young. He's in his mid-20s, and I think that Parker is going to go into that fight with no respect for Lucas and look to bulldoze him, and I think he will.
Mike, let's talk about one of the funniest moments, or a couple of the funniest moments of your boxing career. What happened there, and tell us why.
Funniest moments. You're putting me on the spot. There's so many. I'm just trying to think.
What about the rule meeting we had in Thailand?
That was an absolute circus. That's actually, this is for Simpiwe Konko's fight with Menayotan, the best ever. If you look at his record, what's he now, 54-0? He is a very, very talented fighter, WBC 105-pound world champion. But that was just typical, just dealing with really slimy, dodgy promoters, lying non-stop. And, yeah, of course, you caught out Tanya Prakakorn, the matchmaker, in a lie, which was hilarious. So if you care to elaborate, you tell it much better than me.
Yeah, but we'll touch on it. Well, basically what happened was we asked for a certain style of gloves. We wanted winning gloves, and there was a discrepancy saying that he didn't know who the person I was dealing with. And right at the end of the rules meeting, I said, administratively, this is an issue and a question that I want. We needed our passports back. And the person that I mentioned, who Panya denied knowing earlier, basically he put his hand up and he said, oh, the person that we were talking about's got our passports. And I said, oh, so you do know who he is? Yeah. And then he basically made out like he couldn't understand what we were asking. So, yeah, it was pretty one of the funniest moments of my career, certainly.
I got a few others quick. I know that one of them was in Thailand for TJ Dhoni. So he fought Mike Tawachai in a final IBF eliminator. And we asked to do the urine test, and they literally just bought like a test tube. Nothing to seal it, nothing. And they're like, oh, he can do it in here. It's like, it's handwritten. And I'm like, I'm not letting him piss in that. Now, keep in mind, they bring this into a dressing room, right? It's in a theater. So this is, Mr. Jimmy Promotions. Jimmy's promoting in a theater in the afternoon. But in the evening at that theater, there's a ladyboy show. So there's all this exuberant clothing. There's about 15 ladyboys in the dressing room, and they're saying to TJ that he's got to piss there in this test tube that isn't sealed. And I'm like, fortunately, Daryl Peoples and Annabelle Miramontes from the IBF were there. And Sean Gibbons, of course, our good friend, who we have to mention also works for Maruti and has been instrumental in his path. Yeah, Sean was there, and I spoke to Sean, and then Sean explained it to him. And, yeah, fortunately, we were able to do the test in the hospital, far away from the circus that was backstage at that show. I got a funny story from Ghana. So when Isaac Dogbe fought Cesar Juarez for the interim WBO world title, I remember, I had a seat ringside. On paper, I'm the promoter of the show. Promoter, matchmaker, etc. So I've got a seat in the front row designated. Every time I got up to do something, somebody would take it. I'd have to go there and say to them, look, can you please can you please get out of my seat? It's written in my name. One time, so they called me to go in the ring to make a speech. I go in the ring, make a speech, I walk out, and I Cortez in my seat. I'm like, I ain't asking the Bazooka to move. And then post that fight, I remember, like, because Tony Weeks waved Warriors off, and I could see people start to cascade into the ring from all four sides. I mean, great job by the security we hired. And my first thought was, okay, I've got to run across and try and protect Warriors. I've tried to run across and protect him. People started pouring into the ring. I got knocked from behind, and I fell out of the ropes and onto the apron. So I didn't find it that funny at the time, but it is pretty funny in hindsight, you know. And then there's, like I said, it's just this sport takes us into so many chaotic places. You know, I've been at shows. I remember I was at one show. They were trying to delay the fights in between and instruct the people in the crowd to go and drink beer because they were paying the remainder of the bouts on the show with the sales from the beer money. The promoter actually had no money, so he ran out of funds after about 3 fights.
Mike, if you were to look into a crystal ball, 3-4 years from now, which fighters do you see dominating the sport?
Well, that's a good question. That's a deep question because I think it's such a shifting space. Does that make sense? Like, if you looked into the crystal ball 4 years ago or 3 years ago, you wouldn't think Manny Pacquiao would be a champion now.
True.
And you wouldn't have thought he beats Keith Thurman. Like, I'm saying, like, go back those few years. You think that probably Canelo is still a world champion in 3 or 4 years at the pace of fighting twice a year. I think that you're going to see some surprises. I think you're going to see some young kids rise. You know, some real talented kids out of left field. I don't see, like, say, out of the American fighters and that, I don't see a lot of guys in the current Olympic class that can move as quick as Shakur Stevenson did for the world title. Need to manage him a lot more carefully. But I see certain Eastern Bloc fighters I think can progress really fast in the pros. You know, win world titles under 10 fights like Nurjan Akhmadaliev did. The WBA one, and WBA and actually IBF as well, 122-pound world champion. When I'm looking at guys that are going to be stars, I'm not sure because I think that it's such a shifting space. And I don't think now's not like, if you asked me in 1998 or 99, and you know surefire that Floyd Mayweather was so young and fresh, he was still going to be a champion 3-4 years later. I think that now I don't see so many dominant fighters that, hey, Colin, hopefully we're involved with a few of them. I think that we will be at MTK. I think that we've got some really, really talented kids. You know, I look at, say, like speaking of someone that we do work with, someone like Lorado Lamini is still coming into his own. Even though he's won that IBO title, I think that he's still improving all the time. So you've got guys like that that could surprise you. Give them 2-3 years, they might hit even another higher level. So that's the excitement of the sport. Sometimes it's good just to sit back, play your part, but also watch and enjoy and be pleasantly surprised rather than trying to prognosticate all the time.
So Mike, a question that we asked Bob Yalen the other night was sort of, you know, if you weren't doing what you were doing, what would you be doing? So his answer was he would be an astronaut. What is your answer to that?
So that's a good question. I think probably working in TV. Working in TV, radio, podcasting, that's kind of my background. But I'm not too sure because, like, I've had this conversation quite a few times over the years where I just think, okay, if I am to move onwards, because I know that, like, the lifestyle I've led in recent years can't last forever. You know, like, I'm fortunate in the respect that I don't have kids. I've lived a single lifestyle, you know, so I haven't had commitments where I need to be back home by a certain period. So I can take that risk of being on the road for 2 or 3 months or whatever it may be. But when you're looking to kind of settle down, or when you find the right person to set that up and establish that in your life, I think you need more consistency. So I understand that I need to make some adjustments soon, but it's hard picturing my life without any involvement in combat sports. The things that I do enjoy is working in TV. I enjoy writing, but they always seem to cross over, and there's always components of that kind of bring me back to combat sports. Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if I could be paid to professionally read books, I would probably enjoy that as well. But then maybe after 3 months, I get bored of doing that. So the good thing about boxing and the industry we work in is that things can change so quickly. And no matter how many world champions you work with or how many top-tier talents you work with, there's always someone hungry coming along that gets you excited for the next 3 or 4 years to come.
I've got it. It's become a bit of a legendary story. Talani was in Japan to fight Kuroda. It was our mandatory defense. And you made the fight, but literally the skin of your kappa pants that I gave to you at the venue.
45 minutes.
45 minutes to go. You got to tell us that story, man.
Yeah, so I had a Dog Bay rematch in Navarrete in Tucson, Arizona. Obviously, as people know, he lost the fight. And then the next morning, I was flying from Tucson to LAX to Tokyo. And I was going to get in because Maruti was defending against Kuroda on a Monday night. So I was going to get in 6 hours before the fight. Easy work. I get to the airport, so I'm with Sean Gibbons' son. Now, keep in mind this as well. My credit card started malfunctioning 2 days earlier. So my credit card's not working. I go to the airport, and I'm looking at the flight schedule, and I'm like, all right, perfect. Me and Brendan on the same flight to Tokyo. I go to check in, and they say to me, they go, my connecting flight. So we were, same flight to Tokyo, I should cross back from LAX. But my connecting flight from Tucson to LAX, they're like, we're sorry, sir, but your flight isn't departing until tomorrow. So one of the few times I left all my bookings with a travel agent to do for me, I just assumed they got the dates as I sent them. They booked me the wrong date. Graduation weekend in Tucson. Graduation weekend in Phoenix. So I start scrambling. I'm like, and because, Dog Bay had lost the fight, I'm up all night depressed, I'm eating. I slept maybe 30 minutes, if that. So not a lot of brain activity. I start thinking, I'm like, no, this can't be happening. This can't be happening. I'm looking everything online, can't find anything. I look at everything, asking at the airport, asking at the counter, no, the best we can do is put you on a flight tomorrow. And I keep thinking to myself, I'm like, I can't let Colin down. But more importantly, I can't let Maruti down. He's probably like I said to you, I think of my Mount Rushmore of good-hearted athletes I work with. He's the first guy I would place on there. So it's I need to make this trip. It's not even a financial thing anymore. I need to make it. So like I said, I looked at Phoenix. It's Phoenix an hour from Tucson. No flights from there because graduation weekend in Phoenix too. I look at Corpus Christi, Texas, I think 2.5 hours away. Nothing out of Corpus. I'm like, how on earth am I going to get here? How can I do this? And then, so it's 6:30 in the morning. I find a flight leaving Tucson. So I'm in Tucson. I find the flight leaving San Diego, direct to Tokyo at I think it was 1:10 p.m. And it gets me in basically 2 hours before the fight. I was like, okay, let me just look up how far Tucson is from San Diego. No flights, obviously, internally I can find. I look it up, 700 kilometers. I was like, 700 kilometers, I've got just under 7 hours. Yeah, that's doable. So I've always been my mentality. My mentality is that, if I was a fighter, every fight would be a knockout, and every win will be a knockout, and every loss will be a knockout. Because I go down swinging. If I'm gonna get chinned, I'm gonna get chinned spectacularly, but I'm not gonna give up trying to win for 12 rounds. So I was like, I can do this. Now keep in mind, my Uber can't connect to my credit card, so my phone, I can't book an Uber. So Sean's son has to book it for me. His flight's leaving like 20 minutes later. Books me an Uber. I go out the airport. Driver won't take me. Call him up, get him to book me another one. Driver won't take me. Gets me another one, same story. Another 2 or 3, and the people just cancel as soon as I've called him to talk to them about it. He's just about to get on his flight to depart, and I get him to book me one final Uber. And it's good old Vance from Michigan. Now, the one thing I didn't know about Uber, and maybe I should have educated myself, is but until you basically enter the vehicle, they don't know where you're headed. So they get a location and they'll come and collect you, but then they get updated. So he's like, where you heading? I'm like, San Diego. I'm like, please, please, please. I'm almost crying. I'm begging him. I'm like, please, I'll make it worth your while, please. Now, I think he saw the heartbreak and the despair, but he's like, you know what? You seem like a nice guy. I'm going to do this for you. I was like, oh, this guy has got to be, straight from heaven. So you got to think now, minimal sleep. The adrenaline is pumping the first 2 hours. We make a pit stop. Well, I am with snacks. I bought half of the store, and I'm thinking, I can make this. About an hour in, I think to myself, I better call the airline, tell them the situation, check in online. So stay from there even 30 minutes before the flight can get through, whatever it is. So I'm checking the time on the map, and the first couple of hours, it looks like we're going to arrive about 2 p.m. So the flight's going to be long gone. I haven't told you anything about this situation at that time. I haven't said anything to anyone because I don't want to jinx my luck. So Vance puts pedal to the metal. I agreed with him in advance. I said, I'm going to pay you an extra $150 extra. I go, plus I'll buy all your food on the way, everything. He's making killer time. I swear, he's going like prime Michael Schumacher all the way to San Diego. Now, we get pulled over by the cops at one stage for speeding. He talks his way out of the ticket. But me being the selfish person I am at that state, I'm not thinking this poor guy's going to get a ticket. I'm thinking, damn, that's taken like 10 minutes time off of us. So I look at my app, and surprise, surprise, it says that we're going to arrive at like 12:29. I'm like, damn, we can actually make this. We can make this. What happens is Vance has bought a shake. Like, in America, they got the giant beverage shakes at service stations. He's got one like this big. It's like a 1.5 liter filled with Sprite or whatever he had, right? He has to do like 3 pit stops to go to the bathroom on the way. Each time he's doing that, I'm seeing the time go up by like 6 or 7 minutes. I'm like, oh man, I'm not going to make this. Now, we're about 2.5 hours from there, and I start to become encouraged we're going to get there, but I'm also so mentally depleted that I'm just like, like I've got no energy to talk. And Vance is asking me all these weird questions, and he's talking to me about all of his sexual conquests when he was in college and about what he would like to do to various women and all things. I don't even have energy to entertain any of this talk. But I'm thinking, I've got to keep this dude happy, because if he stops and just drops me off at any time, I'm screwed. So I'm doing my best to muster energy. A couple times, when you're like, oh, you're not off, and then you wake up straight away. But I'd wake up hearing him talk about something, and I'm agreeing with him, but I got no idea what he said. So anyways, we get about 20 minutes from the airport, and he takes a wrong turn. And I'm like, man, this guy's been an all-star, but just when it gets close, you mess it up. But how could I say anything to him? I mean, he's driven 700 kilometers out of the way. he's gone through what, from Arizona all the way through, like, where's he gone through? From Arizona all the way through, I know, passed through like 2 states. He's gone through another state, can't even remember which because my memory's foggy, but then all the way to San Diego. I mean, that's a lot of driving. So, anyways, makes a turn back. I'm like, stay calm, stay calm. If it's God's will, it's God's will. It'll happen. Now, 5 minutes before we're to arrive at the airport, I'm starting to get jazzed now. I'm like, I'm going to make this. This is going to be the greatest story of all time. Best Instagram story ever. You know, no one's going to believe it, but I've got all the facts to back me up. Beebs will back me up, as in Sean's son. It's going to be legendary. So we get about 5 minutes from the airport, and I look over to Vance, and he's bewildered. I think it finally struck him that he's going to have to drive 700 kilometers back the other way. So I gave him like an extra 50. I remember giving him an extra 50 and just thinking, you know, if he wants to get on top of the 150. So I was thinking, if he wants to get himself a room for the night or whatever, you know, at least he can stay out that way and then drive back. But the thing is, so we get in there, and I remember from when we got in, and I'd have to go check my itinerary because I'm sure it was 1:10, sorry, but it could have been 1 p.m. the flight. I remember when I got to the airport, I had 31 minutes till the full takeoff. So I get all my bags. I had 3 bags. I've been traveling for about a month. So I'm trying to run, but it's like saying out planes, trains, and automobiles. There's things falling everywhere. I can't actually get any traction to run with my bags because they're too heavy. You know what I'm saying? I can't stack them on top of each other. I had 3 bags, and I had 2 carry-on. So I sprint to the counter, and I'm like, still thinking, they're going to lock me off this flight. I've got no hope. I get to the counter, I'm like, hi, I called in advance. They're like, Mr. Altamura, it's fine. Come right through. They asked for my passport, gave my passport. They printed my ticket. They had someone at the airport take me through to the gate. Fastest I've ever gone through customs. I get to the gate like at 12:48, and then they announce that the flight's been delayed 20 minutes. So I had half hour just to chill and relax and to reflect on, you know, a wild 7 hours or so. So from there, I sleep on the flight wonderfully. And I've got to say, Japan Airlines, best airline I've ever flown with in terms of customer service, just fantastic. Couldn't recommend them anymore. Get to Tokyo, I get a taxi from the airport because we didn't want to organize someone from the promoter side to pick me up. I get a taxi from the airport to Korakuen Hall. Get to Korakuen Hall, arrive there 45 minutes before the fight, and there's a picture in the dressing room of me there with all my luggage. Remember that, Colin? I got all my luggage in the dressing room. Now, what happened is the adrenaline from, you know, I recovered a bit on the flight, but the adrenaline from the flight, the adrenaline from making it, getting to Maruti, it wears off in about round 7. So I remember Colin hands me something, and he says to me, so at the end of the round, he goes, all right, he goes, rinse that. Rinse. He goes, Mike, the gum shield. And I go to hand him a bottle of water because I couldn't compute in my head what a gum shield was.
It was actually the spit bucket, bro.
Oh, the bucket. See, well, that shows you how bad my memory. It was the spit bucket. I remember you're like, no, the gum shield. And I'm like, what is a gum shield? And I'm like, oh yeah, mouth guard. And then I hand you that, and the rest is history. Maruti comes out on top. The other thing I remember in that fight is, you know, I think after 8 rounds, I had it 5-3 for Maruti, but I was exceptionally jet lagged, so I wasn't trusting my own ability to score a fight. And I think you had it the same, or maybe about 6-2. And we get told in the fight that we're behind. And so when Maruti gets back, you start firing up and you say, look, we might be, what do you say? Like, we might be behind.
Yeah, I said to Maruti, come, you know, we might be behind in this fight. And you looked at me and you went, huh?
But it worked because he won the last 4 rounds in a landslide. And then, yeah, he ended up winning like 117, 111. So we were actually right, but it was good. It was probably the firecracker he needed. But it was incredible because I remember all that adrenaline. And then after the fight, remember we went to that steakhouse and I was like, I'd booked like, I think an extra 4 or 5 days in Japan because I wanted to go meet with Mr. Honda and also at Tekken Gym and also to go and watch the sumo. I'd never gone to see the sumo, just kept missing it throughout my life. So it was like all this mad rush for 2 days, and then I had like 5 days just to chill out with about $15 I had left from Maruti's purse after all the expenses I incurred. But you know what? The memories you create is priceless, and that counts more than anything. You know, it's a story that will live deep in my heart for the rest of my days. But I got to remember that I gave you a spit bucket. Wow. And I've got to say to you, like, I've got to go thank and also record a podcast with Vance someday to get his perspective on what he thought of the journey when he picked me up and needed to drive me 700 Ks. That's just out of this world. Like, at the time I was thinking, why wouldn't anyone want to take me 700 K? Now I look back at it and I'm like, how insane are you to expect that anyone would drive you 700 kilometers? Crazy memories.
Mike, looking back in history, which fighter would you think this is a fighter I would have loved to work with?
Ruti Matalani. From debut. Lester Ellis. I think that Lester won the world title at 19 years of age and had such a savage style, ferocious body puncher, fast hands, didn't understand how to control range, even as world champion at 19. And I think that if he had the team around him that could have slowed him down and gotten him to keep evolving and keep learning as a fighter and pace his career, I think he could have gone down as one of Australia's greats. The other one, another guy who won a world championship at 19, Lionel Rose. In my view, Australia's greatest fighter of all time. Just a brilliant talent, such fast hand speed, composure. Like to go to Tokyo, Japan at 19 and to knock off a 2-division champ in fighting Harada, who was one of the top pound-for-pound guys in the world at that time. Like, that's legendary kind of stuff, you know, and that's things like over 15 rounds he went there and calmly outboxed him. I think that's a guy I would have loved to work with too. So, you know, being Australian, I think it's only right that I reflect the Australian talent and what I felt I could have done with them. But yeah, there's so many other cases. For me, it's more the fighters that I see what they could have achieved as well. Like someone like Emmanuel Augustus. I mean, I worked with him a little bit when he was in Australia and he was a loose cannon, and I just couldn't get him on track or to trust or believe in the vision because he had been burnt by so many people in the industry that he kind of had the mentality of a lone ranger, and lone rangers don't really succeed in the sport. You need a team around you. But like someone like Emmanuel Augustus, in fact, he ended up like 38, 34, and 6. Like, that's an absolute joke. I mean, the guy had the ability to be a world champion. Just, it's been in the right hands and being nurtured.
Mark, I want to ask you the most generic question in boxing. And because it's interesting.
That's okay.
It's interesting from a fan's point of view because everyone has a different answer and everyone looks up to different people. But who is your favorite boxer of all time?
Lester. So Lester Ellis all time. But if I start to go beyond that, like internationally, I always loved Mike McCallum. I think that he was just severely underrated and such a good fighter on the inside, hard, ferocious, tough as nails, very, very underrated. Love McCallum, love Sugar Ray Leonard. I mean, you know, I will argue with anyone who tries to challenge me that Hagler beat him because I thought Leonard thoroughly outboxed him, and I always believe that. I think, you know, just a terrific talent. You go look at the amount of fights he had and how many career-defining fights that were in that. It's incredible. Arturo Gatti, Ray Mancini, you can see a trend with a lot of the guys I like there. Your blood and guts throwback fighters, you know, that would bring it every time and leave it all in the ring. But for me, there's so many. Like, I talk to Colin all the time about like 90s boxing, like Julian Jackson. Man, what a fighter! Then you go back to like say 80s, early 90s. IBF featherweight world champion. Was the IBF WA? I'm sure IBF. Might be in WA. Antonio Esperagoza. Like, what a boxer! What a fighter! What a talent! And fast hands, knowing how to control range, knowing how to control distance. There's so many guys. Ricardo Lopez. Love watching Ricardo Lopez. Probably, to me, anyway, is the most technically perfect fighter of all time. You know, like in terms of like that modern style, another proponent of the Nacho Beristain school of boxing. There's so many guys I just really enjoyed watching over the years, you know.
Mike, it's been an absolute treat having you on the Boxing Lockdown. Your last parting shot for the show.
Last parting shot. I'm still waiting for your check to come in the mail for this appearance, but because of COVID-19, all mail has been delayed or postponed, so I might get it in 2021. But no, you know, it's an honor. I really love what you guys do with the channel and how you cover the sport. It helps from afar to keep up with all the ongoings in South African boxing. You guys profile even the young up-and-comers. You've got a very enthusiastic, very positive take on the sport, which I respect. And as for you, Colin, man, I look forward to creating more world champions out of MTK Africa with you. You know, it's been one of my best friends in the sport, and it's been a pleasure working with the fighters we have so far, but I know that we're just getting started.
Yeah, Mike, you're very special to me. Definitely love you, brother. You're a good man. That's been the Boxing Lockdown, powered by SA Boxing Talk. Michael Altamura chatting to us here on the Boxing Lockdown. We will catch you again soon.